John Winston Lennon, a name that resonates in the annals of music history, was a musician, singer, songwriter, and co-founder of one of the world's most iconic bands, the Beatles. John and Beatles co-founder Paul McCartney went on to become the most successful songwriting team in history. John was born on October 9, 1940, in Liverpool, England, during a time when the world was in the throes of World War II. His parents, Julia Stanley and Alfred Lennon, had a tumultuous marriage until it fell apart and Julia found herself another man. John was sent to live with his Aunt Mimi and her husband George Smith. This gave him some family stability, but his childhood and upbringing would shape his life and music in profound ways. John was known as a happy-go-lucky, good-humored and easygoing lad. But he did get into his fair share of trouble and was known to frequently engage in fights, bully other children and disrupt classes. Throughout his life he was close to his Aunt Mimi and would call her every week until his death. He even bought her a house in Dorset, southwest England in 1965, where she lived until her death in 1991. John's passion for music was ignited at a young age when his mother Julia bought him his first guitar when he was 16. In 1956 he formed a skiffle group called the Quarry Men, named after his school, Quarry Bank High School. The Quarry Men initially played the Casbah Coffee Club in Liverpool, owned by Mrs. Mona Best, and became friends with her son Pete, who played the drums. Lennon first met Paul McCartney on July 6, 1957 at the Woolton Parish Church Fete, and asked him to join the band. This was the beginning of one of the most iconic songwriting partnerships in music history. The new band would rehearse in the front room of Paul's house, and it was during this time that John wrote his first song, Hello Little Girl, which became a UK top 10 hit in 1963 for a band called The Foremost. Paul McCartney then recommended that his friend George Harrison join the group as lead guitarist. However, John was skeptical because George was only 14 years old, but Paul's persuasive insistence made John give in and George was accepted into the band. In 1958, John lost his mother Julia. She was struck and killed by a car on her way home after visiting Mimi. John was deeply traumatized by this tragedy. He was consumed by an endless rage, wanting to lash out at everyone. His grades fell and he flunked his O-levels. He was only accepted at Liverpool Art College because of the intervention of Aunt Mimi and his school headmaster. He gradually got over the trauma of his mother's death and began to concentrate on his music. His mother Julia's memory would later serve as a major creative inspiration for him. John's friend from art college Stuart Sutcliffe joined the band in 1960 and suggested the name Beatles for the band. The others agreed, and so the Quarry Men became the Beatles. After accepting a residency at a Hamburg club and being short of a drummer, Pete Best joined them. Between 1960 and 1962 the Beatles toured Germany 5 times and played at various clubs in Hamburg, the most prominent being the Star Club. In 1962 John married Cynthia Powell, his friend from school. They had one son, Julian. But he divorced her in 1968 and married the Japanese avant-garde artist, Yoko Ono. Along with their tours of Hamburg, the Beatles had a regular residency at the Cavern Club in Liverpool. It was here in 1962 that they met Brian Epstein, who became their manager. Brian Epstein came from a successful Liverpool business family and was to play a very important part in the lives and careers of the boys. He secured them their first recording contract with EMI and looked after all their financial affairs and bookings. Brian was a helpful friend, efficient manager, and believed in them. They in turn came to heavily rely on him. Their debut single, Love Me Do, released on the EMI Parlophone label with new drummer Ringo Starr, who replaced Best, was followed by their first album, Please Please Me, the first of 11 consecutive Beatles albums released in the United Kingdom to reach number 1. This was followed by the mega hit, I Wanna Hold Your Hand. This marked the start of Beatlemania in the UK and set the stage for global domination. Thereafter, the Beatles released a string of iconic albums, including Beatles for Sale, A Hard Day's Night, Help, Rubber Soul, and Revolver, topping charts the world over. The Beatles toured the world, and everywhere they went, they were treated like royalty, with screaming fans, heavy police escorts, hundreds of journalists, and other trappings of fame and luxury. Being on the road for long periods of time, they were getting tired of the monotony. Furthermore, John and Paul realized they weren't spending enough time to write and record songs. Finally realizing that their shows were not about the music, they performed their last concert at Candlestick Park in San Francisco on August 29, 1966, and never toured again. They went back into the studios, and in 1967, they released Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, considered to be the most iconic album of all time. That same year, Brian Epstein died. The Beatles were totally devastated. He had been their rock and had kept them in line, and now he was no more. In 1970, in an interview with Rolling Stone magazine, John said, "I knew that we were in trouble then. I thought, we've had it now." By now, the band's internal tensions, creative differences, and personal struggles began to erode their unity. There was constant bickering and infighting. In 1968, the group recorded the Beatles' double album, commonly known as the White Album for its plain white cover. It was now that relations between the members deteriorated and grew openly divisive. Matters became worse when John insisted on bringing Yoko Ono to the recording sessions, despite the fact that all band members had agreed that girlfriends and wives were not allowed in the studio. The band recorded 2 more albums after the White Album: Abbey Road and Let It Be, and in 1969, Lennon privately informed the group of his departure, which was not publicly revealed until 1970. On April 10, 1970, Paul McCartney announced the official breakup of the Beatles. After the Beatles' breakup, John released his debut solo album, John Lennon, The Plastic Ono Band, in 1970, a raw and emotional work that delved into his troubled past. He was known for his political activism, advocating for peace and participating in anti-war protests. Lennon's song, Imagine, became an anthem for peace and remains one of his most iconic songs ever. He spent several years in self-imposed exile in New York City, during which he released albums like Mind Games and Walls and Bridges. John's return to the music scene in 1980 with Double Fantasy marked a creative resurgence. The album included songs like Woman and Just Like Starting Over. Tragically, John Lennon's life was cut short on December 8, 1980, when he was shot and killed by Mark David Chapman outside his New York apartment, the Dakota. He was 40 years old. His death sent shockwaves around the world, leaving a void in the music industry and the hearts of millions of fans. John Lennon's legacy endures through his music, activism, and the enduring impact of the Beatles. His contributions to the world of music and peace advocacy continue to inspire and resonate with generations of fans. We live in a world where we have to hide to make love, while violence is practiced in broad daylight. As usual, there is a great woman behind every idiot. It's amazing how low you go to get high. Happiness is just how you feel when you don't feel miserable. Everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. Violence begets violence, you know. And you can't kill off all the violent people or all the murderers. We'd have to kill off the government. Songwriting is like being possessed. You try to go to sleep, but the song won't let you. Being honest may not get you a lot of friends, but it'll always get you the right ones. My role in society, or any artist's or poet's role, is to try and express what we all feel. Not to tell people how to feel. Not as a preacher, not as a leader, but as a reflection of us all. My teacher asked me what I want to be when I grow up. I said happy. She told me I don't understand the assignment. I told her she doesn't understand life. Time you enjoy wasting was not wasted. Count your age by friends, not years. Count your life by smiles, not tears. A mistake is only an error. It becomes a mistake when you fail to correct it. When you do something noble and beautiful and nobody noticed, do not be sad. For the sun every morning is a beautiful spectacle, and yet most of the audience still sleeps. Don't underestimate the importance of happiness. As long as you're happy, who cares what you do? You won't get anything unless you have the vision to imagine it. Whenever in doubt, turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream. It matters not who you love, where you love, why you love, when you love, or how you love. It matters only that you love. Reality leaves a lot to the imagination. You don't need anybody to tell you who you are or what you are. You are what you are. Don't hate what you don't understand. Nobody controls me. I'm uncontrollable. The only one who can control me is me, and even that's barely possible. Our society is run by insane people for insane objectives. I think we're being run by maniacs for maniacal ends, and I think I'm liable to be put away as insane for expressing that. That's what's insane about it. Tame birds sing of freedom. Wild birds fly. I believe in God, but not as one thing, not as an old man in the sky. I believe that what people call God is something in all of us. I believe that what Jesus and Muhammad and Buddha and all the rest said was right. It's just that the translations have gone wrong. The trouble with government as it is that it doesn't represent the people. It controls them. Everyone deserves to believe they are beautiful. Trying to please everybody is impossible. If you did that, you'd end up in the middle with nobody liking you. The people have the power. All we have to do is awaken the power in the people. You are not your emotions, you have emotions, and you can master them. Love is the answer. What was the question? There are two basic motivating forces, fear and love. We need to learn to love ourselves first, in all our glory and our imperfections. If we cannot love ourselves, we cannot fully open to our ability to love others or our potential to create. Paranoia is just a heightened sense of awareness. The more real you get, the more unreal everything else is. Love is the flower you've got to let grow. If everyone demanded peace instead of another television set, then there'd be peace. We've got this gift of love, but love is like a precious plant. You can't just accept it and leave it in the cupboard or just think it's going to get on by itself. You've got to keep watering it. You've got to really look after it and nurture it. I'm not afraid of death because I don't believe in it. It's just getting out of one car and into another. Evolution and all hopes for a better world rest in the fearlessness and open-hearted vision of people who embrace life. Happiness is inside you, not with another person. I'm not going to change the way I look or the way I feel to conform to anything. Work is life, you know, and without it, there's nothing but fear and insecurity.